Check, check, mic check. Check, check, mic check. Hey, podcasters. Welcome to Podcast Envy. I'm your podcast boss, Andrea Klender. And once again, I am here with the fabulous Hannah DeBoer.
Hey.
Now that you've had some time to think about your bio and how you'd like to describe yourself, how would you introduce yourself today?
Well, lover of stories. I love stories in the form of television, of course. I'm like big fangirl, especially of relationships and shipping people together and all that drama.
Wait, did you just say shipping people together?
Oh, yeah. Do you know what that is?
No.
Oh, it's like this fangirl thing. When you watch a show and there's these two characters on the show that you want to be in a relationship or that you think would be really good together or you just really like and you think it would be cool to see them either romantic or sometimes you can do like a friendship or something, but it's called like relationshipping and just kind of put them on a ship together and they're like going off into their journey. They're shipping them together. And so, like, I'll watch a show and you can tell, like, there's this romance building or something. You're like, oh, I really love this particular couple. And so then they come up with, like, ship names. So, like, on The 100, there's these two characters called Bellamy and Clark, and their ship name's Bellark. And so, like, if you want them together, you're, like, a Bellark fan. And, like, I'm a big Lost fan. And the couple that I liked were Sawyer and Juliet. And so the ship name was Juliet. So you like combine their names together and that tells you like what couple you like the most. And that's actually my Twitter name, Juliet05, because I had it when I was like really into Lost and that was the ship that I was going for. So then, yeah, so if you're talking about the show and like a community that's like around that show or listening to a podcast, one show that I'm really excited about coming out now is Timeless. One of the main couples on there that people ship together are Wyatt and Lucy. And so some people call their ship Lyat, L-Y, like A-T-T or something. But like I also like Woosie. When you're like talking to the community, you can be like, I can't believe Woosie is going through this or like whatever. And you know it's like that relationship that you're talking about.
I clearly do not watch enough television.
Oh, no?
So if you couldn't tell, this is another episode of Podcast Therapy where we recommend taking a break, doing some listening, getting some good content, some entertainment, some learning, some inspiration, some
camaraderie, fangirling.
Conversation with fangirls.
Yeah.
And we're bringing you some new to us or new-ish to us podcasts or perhaps new to you podcasts to check out and listen to add to your queue. And today, Hannah, what are you listening to?
Well, one of the ones that I listen to that I think is playing into my love of stories. And I think that like everyone has a story and as a writer, like my stories might be like the fictional ideas, like, oh, I want to write about this sci-fi adventure or a YA novel or something that's happening to someone else. But it's also, we have people who write more nonfiction or things that go on in their everyday life and people write memoirs or just, even if you're not writing, if you just step out the door in the morning, you're starting a story to your day, you know, and what in that day is going to make you who you are, who you're going to be, or like, how does it tribute to your choices and everything. So life is a story in itself, I think. And one of the podcasts that I'm listening to now that I want to talk about is called The Other F Word, which is failure, or what they say is they're taking the shame out of failure. The other F word, the one you're too afraid to say out loud. We're going there and laying it bare. Join us in our conversations about the messy, tragic, funny, inspiring stories that make us human. It's this panel of 3 hosts. Morgan is the main host. He is a writer, filmmaker. Then there's Sarah, who is like a journalist and a mother of 3. And the other is Melissa, who is a licensed therapist. So it's cool to kind of have this like trio of hosts that can give you different perspectives and reactions on each story. I like the aspect also that they have Melissa on there because she can bring in what she knows from being a therapist and how it relates to the story of the person that they're interviewing, we don't really want to think about how we fail or how we did something wrong, or we don't want to think about the bad things. But if by listening to this podcast, it makes you think about like, yeah, I failed, but I made it through it. And what did I learn from failing? And what did I learn from all these things that happened to me? I'm not going to let it just take me down. I'm going to learn from it and move on. And maybe the things that I've learned from failing at what I'm trying to do might help other people who are also trying to get through things and learn that it's okay to fail. It's okay to have roadblocks on the way, but it's how you like learn from it and move on. And what's interesting about all the different stories is that they're not just one thing. There's all these different things that people are dealing with. There's a woman who talks about failing to be married. I really like this episode, Krista Parkinson, on failing to get married. She grew up in the Mormon faith, and she was like, okay, I'm going to be in my church. I'm going to go to college and I'm going to get my MRS. You know, I'm going to meet the guy I'm going to marry and everything's going to work out. But when it doesn't end up going that way, like she didn't find her husband in college and then get married and have kids and stay in the Mormon faith and all that kind of things. She talks about her journey of how her life changes and how she learns different things, and she comes out of the faith and experiences things that she wouldn't have experienced before if she stayed there. And it's just like these real honest conversations with people that show you that you're not alone. You might go through things and try all these different things, and it's not the end of the world. If you fail at something, you just got to keep trying. You know, there's one where they talk to a guy who runs like a failure museum in Los Angeles, which is interesting.
Are you going to go?
Yeah, I would like to. I actually have to check it out. They like go to the exhibit and there's quotes on the wall and there's unfinished projects and there's like exhibits of people who tried something and failed. You know, there's a quote from like Oprah, I think, on the wall. And you're like, well, Oprah is really successful, you know, but you fail in life and then you succeed. You know, you got to keep trying. You know, if at first you don't succeed, try again. That might be a mother quote. You know, your mom has all these different quotes. But I love the podcast, and it's just great to hear their stories and kind of get a connection with people from all these different backgrounds and interests. So I'd suggest this one if you want that camaraderie feel or that learning from your past and learning, okay, well, they hit all these roadblocks, but look, they're coming through it and they're making lemonade out of lemons or whatever.
Oh, it's that podcast angel time again. This is the part of the episode where I get to tell you about someone awesome who is helping to make this show and your listening experience possible. But before I do that, I just want to give a shout out for the shout out that we received on Apple Podcasts from Totally Addicted 05. This is a 5-star review that says, Andrea is awesome. I love podcasts and love to learn more. I'm so glad she's doing this. Big fan. Woohoo. Thanks, Totally Addicted 5. If you want to leave your own rating and review of Podcast Envy, I would love that. And I also want to give a shout out to Anna Joy of Anna Joy Healing, one of our community members and listeners who just launched her very own show. You will remember Anna Joy from her question on the Hey Andrea segment back in episode number 6 of Podcast Envy. Is there some kind of checklist available for everything that I need to have ready to launch? Well, Anna Joy must have gotten the checklist and figured it all out because her new show is called The Queer Witch Podcast, and I will link to it in the show notes for this episode at podcastenvy.com. Woohoo! Congratulations on your new show! All right, are you in suspense? Do you want to know who is this week's podcast angel? I know you do, and it's you! It's you! Hey, podcast angel, I'm looking at you. I just updated my settings on that nifty little site called Patreon. You can easily find my Patreon site by going to thecreativeimpostor.com/support. You, for as little as $2 per month, $2, you will get access to super secret special content from me. I also have some pretty big goals when it comes to podcast mentoring, so you should check out the goals section of that page as well. Again, that's thecreativeimpostor.com/support to connect to my Patreon page and support the work that we do here for as little as $2 a month or more. Thanks, Podcast Angel. I appreciate you. This episode is going to be so podcast therapy-y because between that one and the one that I have in mind, we're very in the like human psyche kind of connecting with other people's stories and facing anxiety and facing fears and facing failure and facing disappointment and all those things. The one that I have in mind it's a little bit self-promotional. It's not my show, but I did help the host and producer to launch her show, and Edwin and I actually do her editing as well. It's called Conversations with a Wounded Healer. It's by Sarah Bueno, who is a licensed clinical social worker and addictions counselor. I think those are her designations. You know, when people have so many letters after their name, you're trying to remember what all the letters stand for. But I know that Sarah is definitely an addictions counselor here in Chicago, and her practice is called Head Heart Therapy. We met at a free podcasting class that I was teaching at Nextdoor Chicago many months ago. And then I had Sarah on the Creative Impostor as a guest, and the feedback that she got from people was so positive. People were loving her interview so much that she was like, well, I guess I have to start my own show.
That's so cool.
So her show just launched. It's a combination of interviews and then solo episodes. And she's talking with other people who are in different lines of healing work. So therapists, somatic practitioners, anyone who would consider the work that they do to be healing or potentially healing in some way. A lot of times new podcasters, I feel like it takes us time when we first start our show to find our voice and find our rhythm and relax and not be so nervous and let our personality come through. Like if you find a show that you really love and they're on episode 50, 75, 100, whatever, and you go back and listen to the first few episodes, sometimes it sounds very different. But she's like a natural right from the beginning. And maybe it's because her profession involves a lot of listening and empathizing and asking questions. But she's just really real, and she is really honest and has a very high level of disclosure. One of her first solo episodes is about a dream that she had that involves the fear of falling, which is, you know, a dream that I think a lot of us have had at some point in time, like being afraid to fall or potentially falling, or we are falling or something.
Or you wake up and you're like, they're
so, yeah, you have that like feeling of, Even though the audience for her show is really geared more towards other healing practitioners, almost like talking shop, I think even if you're not in that line of work, you can get a lot out of it just in terms of thinking about the different ways that we work with our minds and the different ways that we work with emotions and navigate different things. And also just looking at how just because somebody is a therapist or is some kind of professional practitioner or knows a lot about this stuff, like you still have your own BS that you go through too in your mind. So it's kind of interesting just to get sort of a behind the scenes look into a therapist's mind.
That's cool.
Yeah. So podcast therapy today is all about giving yourself a little therapy by listening to podcasts, The Other F Word, and Conversations with a Wounded Healer. Is there anything else that we should share with our listeners today, Hannah?
Just that I'd like to hear what you guys are thinking and what podcasts you suggest. And if you have listened to the ones that we are recommending, feel free to reach out to me at my Instagram. And I'd love to see what you're listening to. Screenshots, pictures, thoughts, any feedback.
Awesome. And we'll link both of our Instagrams in the show notes for this episode at podcastnv.com and also in the show notes within your app. Yeah, suggestions, feedback. What are you listening to? What do you love? Do you like our suggestions? And we'll catch you on another episode of Podcast Envy featuring podcast therapy with Hannah and Andrea coming soon. Podcast Envy is produced by your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder. That's me. The Podcast Envy theme music is by Valentin Sosnitsky, courtesy of the Free Sound Project at freesound.org, and our podcast Angel music is by Benjamin Mastropolito, also on freesound.org as Lemon Cream. All music is licensed under the Creative Commons. Our episodes are mixed by Edwin Ruiz, and hey, if you want your show to sound as good as ours, hire us. Put the magic audio mojo of the Creative Impostor Studios to work for you. Thanks so much for listening, and here's to making your podcast the envy of everyone else.